In this video, we're going to look at completing the exercises in Chapter 4. We'll start with exercise number 1. It says, create a class named Form Letter Writer that includes two overloaded methods named Display Salutation. The first method takes one string parameter that represents a customer's last name, and it displays the salutation, Dear Mr. or Mrs., followed by the last name. The second method accepts two string parameters that represent a first and a last name, and it displays the greeting, Dear, followed by the first name, a space, and the last name. After each salutation, display the rest of a short business letter. Thank you for your recent order, something like that. And write a main method that tests each overloaded method. Save the file as formletterwriter.java. All right, so let's start by creating a new class, a new file. And let me see if I can just copy a little bit of code here to get us started. And we have all these extra spaces I'm getting rid of. All right, may as well close everything just so we don't forget to do it later. All right, and then let's read that description one more time. So we're going to have an overloaded method. So if you remember what that means, when you're overloading a method, that is, we're going to use the same method name, and in any given circumstance, we're going to accept different numbers of items being passed in. So they'll receive either one parameter or two. So let's begin by creating the first of those methods. So we're gonna be calling it using this here. So I'm just going to copy that just to kind of help me out. So one thing I know that if I'm going to be running that method from somewhere, I'm going to do it from within the main method. So for right now, even though I have nothing to call, I am putting that in there, knowing that I'm going to be adding some stuff down below here. All right, so in order to be able to run a method, and if we're going to display a salutation, we're going to be putting something inside here. And if you read what it said, it says the first method takes one string that represents a customer's last name, and it displays the salutation, Dear Mr. or Mrs. Smith. Okay? So why don't we go ahead, and just put in the name Smith. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do first. I'm trying to get it to say, Dear Mr. or Mrs. Smith. So if we're to do that, we do need to have that other method created, or the method created in the first place. So we want it to be available to all other parts of the program. So we're going to say public. We're going to put in static and void. And then we're going to put in its name, display. In fact, it's probably still in my buffer. There it is. And that will accept a parameter that is a string. And we will call that last name. I'll do it in camel case. And now we need to create the structure for that method. So we're going to have an opening curly brace, drop a line or two, close it. In between, we are just going to do a very simple little output. right? It tells us to display Dear Mr. or Mrs. Smith, okay? So we're just going to do a system out print line, Dear Mr. or Mrs. Ms., whatever you want to call it. We're going to add to it last name. And if I'm not mistaken, well, think about how a salutation works, right? Dear Mr. Smith, comma, right? So that's what I'm going to throw in here. I'm going to put a comma at the end. Close my parens and put in a semicolon. All right, so that's one. So if I ran this right now, it would do an output, Dear Mr. and Mrs. Mr. or Mrs. Smith, comma, and that would be done. All right, but we are going to be overloading this. So that means we're going to create a second version of this. And it says the second one accepts 2 string parameters, first and last name. So it should be pretty easy. We should be able to just copy this. That's what I'm going to do. And this one's going to accept string last name, but we're going to also include a string first name. Now, of course, our output's going to change a little bit. And in this case, we're going to say the second one takes 2 parameters, and it displays the greeting Dear followed by first and last name. So Dear John Smith, etc. So let's see if we can do that. So Dear, and in here we want to put first name, right? A space. Last name, and then of course a comma at the end once again. So that's really the 2 different methods. Not so bad, right? Mm-hmm. All right. And then to continue here, it says, after each salutation, display the rest of a short business letter. And here they're just saying, thank you for your recent order. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. Then it says, write a main method that tests each overloaded method and save it as form letter writer. So what I'm going to do here is, because we know that we want to display the form letter, and I can do this a couple of different ways, mind you. But what I'm going to choose to do is I'm actually going to create a separate method. And let's see, it's called display form letter. Okay. I'm not going to send anything into that one, because when it's a form letter, everyone says the same thing, right? So then I'm just going to do a system out print line. Oops. Thank you for your recent order. And then I'm going to put in a new line character. And I might actually throw in a space here, and you'll see why as I move along. Okay. So if I display a salutation, I then would want to display my form letter. So display form letter. That one doesn't need anything going in. And then I'm just going to copy this whole structure here because I'm doing an overload, right? And in the second one, instead of sending in one parameter, I'm going to send in two. So I'm going to say John Thomas Smith. All right, so display salutation. So what this is going to do, it's going to come down here, say, Dear Mr. or Mrs. Smith, comma, display form letter. Thank you for your recent order. Then the next thing it's going to do is it's going to say, this case got two things coming in. Dear John Smith, thank you for your recent order. And then you'll figure out why on earth did he do this? And what does that do? Do you guys remember? Yeah, it puts a new line in there. Remember, print line moves us down to the next line anyhow. We do want to give this an appropriate name. Let me get the file name they want us to use. formletterwriter.java. So let's go ahead and save this. Then I'm going to go ahead and do a compile. Oh, we got one little error here. Let's see if we can figure it out. It says, aha, and no closing semicolon. But see, I did that just to test you guys. Oh yeah, that for most people. As I like to say, throw up the panic flag. Oh no, compiler. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and run it. Let's see if it did what we expected it. And you really, you know, if you wanted to simulate a real form letter, what you might want to do is something like this. See how we put in a new line here? You could copy that, and really you could put it here and here. That space at the front doesn't look so good. But I might have, you know, a whole bunch of text. We will be sending out your order soon. Etc., etc. All right, so if you picture it just doing a form letter, you know, the whole body of the message can be much more involved. But here, basically, our point is we send in one. It does just one. We send in two, then it uses the other format. Because in this case, it only knows the last name. In this case, it knows both. That's an overloaded method. Piece of cake, right? Right. Thank you. It is a piece of cake. That one's not hard. And hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, you can have as many levels of this as you want. So you want to pass in one thing or two things. You want to pass in 5 things. You can set up scenarios for each one of them. Remember, that's called overloading. So that's exercise 1. Okay, we're moving on to exercise number 2. This one says, create a class named billing that includes 3 overloaded compute bill methods for a photo book store. So when it receives a single parameter, it represents the price of 1 photo book ordered. Add 8% tax, return the total due. When it gets 2, multiply the 2 values, add tax, return the total due. When it gets 3, represent the price of a photo book, quantity ordered, coupon value, multiply, add tax, return total. So it gives you 3 different scenarios based on 3 different levels of input. So the one thing that we can do to start with, well, we do need to begin a new program. So let's go ahead, and I'm hoping you guys are getting to the point now, and gals, that some of this Java stuff is getting a little bit familiar in terms of syntax. So you might be able to just start typing like I'm doing. Is this stuff looking familiar at this point? So, I'm assuming we're going to be doing some stuff here. So I'm not putting anything in the main method yet, but I do know that I need to create 3 overloaded methods called compute bill. So I'm just going to copy this. That's going to be the name of it. And then we need to make sure that it's available to all parts of the program. So we say public. We're not worried about necessarily changing things. However, if you read the program here, it says receive a single parameter. So we get the price of 1 photo book ordered, add 8% tax, and return the total due. So are we going to return a value or not? We just told us we are. Okay. So if we're returning a monetary value, what type of data type should it be? A double. Double is a good choice. Okay. Now, this one here should receive a double. That's money, a monetary value. And why don't we call it, oh gosh, amount, abbreviated amount. Okay. Then we need our opening and closing curlies. And let's see what that says. It gets that parameter, add 8% tax, return the total due. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to compute the bill, right? So we're going to need to take whatever the amount is that's coming in, and we need to figure out the tax on it, and that's going to be 8%. Now, I'm just going to type in the word, and then hopefully you guys will see where I'm going here. Tax. You think tax is going to be a thing that changes? The answer is no. So right up here at the top, I'm going to add a final static double named tax. Now, because it says final at the beginning of it, it is a constant. The tax rate's not going to change, or at least it's not going to change often, unless we build a stadium or something. It's going to be 8%. So I'm just hard coding that value, and whenever I want to work with the tax amount, all I have to do is change that. Now, it's not that hard to actually hard code the value into the method that we're building, but the rationale is if you're writing a large application that might call upon the tax many times over, then it makes sense to have it in one spot. So if the tax rate changes, I just change that one line and the whole program changes. Okay. So that's the logic there. Now, if I'm computing tax and I multiply, say I'm selling something for $1, it's taxable, the tax rate's 8%, how much am I paying for it total? $1.08, right? The tax is 8 cents. So if I do this calculation, I'm going to get a result of 8 cents in that case. So really what I need to do is I also need to add the original amount to it. And some people might go to the trouble of doing this. All right, so this will calculate out to 8 cents, and this is $1, so it's going to be $1 plus 8 cents. But remember, given the order of operations, you can also do this, because this will still multiply first. And another way to do it, honestly, is you do 1.08, but we're not going to do that. We're going to leave it like this. But we do need to take whatever we're calculating here and apply it to some sort of variable so we can manipulate it. And I'm just going to say double bill equals amount plus amount times tax. And then at the end of the statement, I'm going to do a return, and I'm just going to say return the bill. And that's it. All right. Now, we already know from our problem description 1 parameter, 2, and 3. So we need 3 different versions of this. The beautiful thing is they're somewhat repetitive. So I'm going to paste them in twice. This one, the second one's going to receive 2 parameters. One is the price of the photo book and the quantity ordered. So why don't we do this? This one's going to be amount. And the quantity ordered, is that going to be a double? Can you? Why? No. It'll be an integer, right? Because you can only order, you know. I suppose you could order part of one, but it wouldn't work too well. And I'm going to call that one quantity. So the first thing that we're going to do okay, see, I need to think about this before I just go acting on it. The first part of it is we will first need to do a little multiplication. So let's multiply the amount, what it costs, times the quantity. Okay, so if I have 2 of them at $10, that's going to be 20. So bill is going to become 20. Then I need to do the tax. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep a running total. Bill can change. And then I'm going to take basically this same approach, but I'm going to do it with bill. So I'm going to say bill, bill plus bill times tax. And then once again, I'm going to return bill. So that's with 2. So that's part 2 is done. Next one says 3 parameters. One is the price, so I already have that. We have the quantity ordered, and then we're going to enter in a coupon value. Multiply the quantity and the price, reduce the result by the coupon value, and then add 8% tax and return the total due. Okay. Now, you can read a coupon value as a lot of different things. All right. So, and let me give you this situation to ponder. If you get a coupon, how do coupons usually work? I can think of 2 different ways. One is you get 10% off or something like that, right? Another way is this is a $5 coupon. Okay? So because I think it's a little bit easier math, I'm going to do a $5 coupon. So I'm going to do it for a set dollar amount, but we can put in that dollar amount. So that's what's going to happen here. So here I'm going to copy this and add it in. And then will the coupon be an int? Actually, let's make it a double because we don't know what the exact value is going to be. So I'm going to say coupon. And then I think we should be able to copy at least the first, well, at least we're going to copy the first line for sure, right? Because you still have to, the amount you have times the quantity, that makes sense, right? And then the question is, do we remove the coupon before tax or after tax? That's a question too, isn't it? Well, I'm going to make the executive decision here that we are removing the coupon before we calculate the tax. And I think that's how most stores do it anyhow. So bill minus coupon. And then we'll do this calculation, which is the same. We just calculate the sales tax. And that should do it, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a save here. And when I get a free moment, I'm going to figure out why it keeps dropping me into this folder over and over again. All right, and then I'm going to go back to the instructions and make sure I'm not missing anything. We did this, we did this, we did this. And it says, okay, we didn't do this. Write a main method that tests all three overloaded methods. Save the application. Okay, so with that's still a thing that we have to do. All right, so let's go ahead and in order to pass in the value for whatever bill is going to be, I'm going to create a variable. I don't need to really put anything in it because we're going to do that in the next step. So I'll say bill equals, all right, name of our method's called compute bill. And the first one, we're just going to send in a price. So let's just say $24.99. Then we're going to do a system out print line. Let's see what we have. The okay, so keep in mind now, when we're running this first one, the value of bill is going to be equivalent to whatever we're getting back from this method. So when we run this, it's going to come down here. It's going to send in $24.99. We're going to do a little bit of math with it so it figures out the tax. And then we're going to go to our output, and it says the total for one photo book at $24.99 with tax is, and then it should give us the right amount. Now, of course, one thing you should always do with these is you should check your math although we're going to trust it for the most part. And then we're going to do a little bit of copy paste here. So the next one we are going to put in, let's put in a different price. Let's try $17.50 and then a comma and I don't know, 4. Okay, and then we're going to need to change this. The total for 4 photo books at $17.50 with tax is, that'll be just fine. And now we're going to bump it up to 3. Oops. And this time we're going to send in, let's say the books cost, I don't know, $10. Let's have 6 of them. And our coupon is a really nice coupon. It's for $20. All right. So here it says the total for 6 photo books at $10. I'm actually going to throw the word each in there. Okay, and I think that should do it. I think that's the program. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save again. I'm going to do a little compiling, and hopefully we don't get any error messages. Wonderful. Now let's go ahead and run it. And assuming those are the right prices. And hopefully you got something like that. Now, it is not a bad idea to actually check these calculations. So for example, if I have a book at $17.50 times 4, that's 70, right? And then if I want to get it with sales tax, it's $75.60, and sure enough. Okay. So I can, at this point, say I trust it enough, and hopefully all these values are correct, and that is exercise number 2.